sorry, I'm up, Rob. That was a good long session on BIM. Now I'm just joking. I wasn't sleeping. It was very informative, but yeah, we're gonna get into the good stuff. So another year and another what's new. We got a good few things to get through, and I appreciate that time is running a bit on, but we won't rush. We'll spend our time on Invent as it is due. So I'm going to start off by showing off the new fillet feature. And I'm going to just be using the same sort of data set that Rob was started on. So thanks again to Paul Munford on that one. It's a very lovely data set, and the mouse is reversed. So I'm going to just take this opportunity before I start zooming in and zooming out to quickly change the mouse. Perks of using the same computer. So I'm just going to reverse my zoom direction. And while I'm here, I'm just going to mention that the dark theme that came in from last year is also now slightly more enhanced, and it does look and feel a bit better than it did before. So do give that a try. I won't try it now in case you never know. Rob mentioned the demo ghost, so I won't tempt it, although I now call it the demo kitten, so look out for that one. Explanations to come. So anyway, let's get on to the new fillet tool. Right, so we got the new fillet tool is pretty much, it's much the same tools, it's just split up slightly more. So we've got the full full round fillet. Sorry, my mouse is getting a little caught here. So it's the same full round fillet tool that we had before, and I can simply just select my faces, from A, center, and then B, and off it goes, and it adds a full round. So you'll note that they have brought in an apply button, which is quite handy with the fillet tools. Before we had the menu where we'd have to hit OK, bring up the menu again, especially, oh, my mouse is going haywire. Alright, cool. So the next one we have is the face fillet. So once again, not a new function or tool, but just a new interface. So we have this new properties panel that we can actually snap and move around. So we can snap it into place, move it around, move it to any side of the screen, move it up, down, and just a quick tip there as well, if you are moving any of these new panels and you hold down Control, you can then get a panel to dock close to an edge without actually having to, it's snapping automatically. So there we go. So we'll give that a go. So click in my face A, which I've already done, and my side face, we have the face fillet, and we'll leave that on the default value for that. So nice to have those separate options. I find it's quicker and easier than before, where we would click on the main fillet and then find the tab for it. So the main fillet tool also, once again, in the properties panel, looks slightly different, and you might automatically think, oh well, where's my option to select multiple fillets at a time? We do still have that ability over here. I'm going to just run through them individually, and we also have this new little menu that can also, once again, snap, but is also free to move. And that allows us to choose the type of fillet that we're working with, or perhaps a setback if we want to work with our corner setbacks. And then we have the option to choose our priorities for selection. So I'm going to go with features for now. Choose that feature over there. Let's go with 1.5 millimeters. And I'm going to hit the apply button. So we can do something like that. I'm going to show you the variable fillet next. And if I choose this edge, we'll see that the variable fillet brings in a variable fillet behavior little menu, and I can then add to it. So just like before, we can select a point on the edge that we have to change or add another point that we can then change our variable fillet in. And I'm going to just set this to 2, and I'll change my point 1 and point 3 down to 1, which will then allow for a variation in the fillet as it gets to that point. Now I want that to be right in the middle, so I'm going to set that to 0.5. And this time, instead of clicking the apply button, I'm going to hit a right click, and I have all my options over here as well. So I'll just hit OK, as that's, I think, enough of the fillet command. I'll just drag and drop that down, and we have our finished part. So the fillet command, quite nice. You'll also notice that it also labels the fillets accordingly, whereas before we would have just had it fillet 1, fillet 2, or perhaps all of our fillets in one. Now, if we've done a full round fillet or a face fillet, it actually names them appropriately. So, moving on to the next topic now, we're going to look at the new Constraint status tool. or constraint status option, I guess, is the better term. It's not really a tool. So constraint status is a document-based, I suppose, feature or option. So I'm going to go to Tools. I always get that wrong and go to Manage, but it's Tools. So Document Settings, and I can find it over here in my modeling, and I've got my Show Constraint State in Browser. And if I hit OK and add that in, you'll see that we now have a dot or a line. Well, there's no lines on this one because it is all constrained to some point or another. So we have a black dot to represent it's fully constrained. We have a empty dot or a white dot to indicate that it's sort of got a constraint but not fully constrained, and there would be a dash if it was completely unconstrained. Now that couples in, and I don't know if I've ever really used this menu, but having a look at it, the little hamburger menu in the top right corner of our model panel, we can, or our model browser rather, we can go to display preferences, and we can actually now go and add in hide fully constrained, which then leaves us in our browser anyway with the parts from our model, or sub-assemblies I suppose, or the components is the better term, that are still unconstrained, and we can then just work with those as necessary. And as we add constraints to them, so for example I'll just take this one here and ground it to cheat, it then alters the menu, alters our browser, our model browser. So that's a nice little, I suppose, well, a nice addition for user functionality and ease of use, really. Now, another big addition, well, I feel it's a big addition, is the instance property. So if I go and open up this model over here, probably should have opened a lot of my models beforehand, but then again, Rob just restarted for us, or restarted the session for me after his boring BIM. No, I'm just joking, just joking. It wasn't that boring, it was very informative, Rob. So, on our instance properties, you know, we obviously changing or having properties before would have been linked to the main part file. So a file in Windows, one save of a file means that that instance of that part could only be that one instance. Now we have the instance properties. So if I right click on one of these parts over here, I can go to instance properties. Now essentially it's just a custom iProperty, so you'll see that it's pretty much the custom iProperty window. But what we have is the ability to add a, and I'm going to just call this unique underscore ID, and I can add in a number, so 2022 01. And if I add that in and hit apply, it's now unique, and you'll see that with our constraint status, we also have the little dash at the end of that part, or component rather. I should stop calling them parts because in this case it's a subassembly. Anyway, it's got the little dash to indicate that it has a unique property or an instance property added to it. So I want to add to the rest of my parts. Now I'm going to do that in the bill of materials, and I'm just going to jump over to my structured tab, and we can see that we have unique ID there. I'm just going to make this window a little bigger. Joys of only having one screen. Been working from home too much lately. So with this, we can see that it varies now because we have one part that has a unique ID and all the other ones of all the instances of that don't. So I'm going to break this up now by instance property. Oh, try that again. Instance property. Oh, sorry. We just need to split it up. So the other thing that's come in, sorry, blonde moment, part number row merge settings. So we can now merge or unmerge our rows based on an instance or instance property. So instance row merge, and there we go. Our parts have appeared at the bottom as I was expecting. And I'm just going to select them all. Hopefully, let's see. There we go. And just drag them all up so I can work with them. Drop them there. I'm going to bring my number one to the top. Right, so instead of just typing in a unique ID for each here, I'm going to use the old Excel trick and just drag down and drop them, and then it's going to be a bit easier, although it's not counted in sequence. Just double click and add, double click and add. Oopsie, lost that one. I'll just type it in again. Too quick on the draw for the add-in. Right, so there we go. We've now got instance properties set to this model. And the other thing I just want to do before I leave is to just renumber. So just a normal renumber, start value 1 and increments of 1. Close that and we'll open our drawing. And I'll show you how these instance properties can benefit us within the drawing environment. Well, that loads up. You know, the sort of possibilities for this are quite endless. I mean, I used to do a lot of detailing, and I was always, you know, I did my detailing in AutoCAD, and I was always quite disappointed with Inventor on the ability to, or the lack of ability to be able to split up your items for extra detailing or breaking down the detail. And now we can actually do that with unique ID numbers, instance properties rather, in this case our unique ID number. So I'm going to go and add a balloon, and you can see already that my unique ID has come up individually for each of those the same part number but broken up by a unique ID. And if I just go and click the drop down and choose the unique ID one or balloon, I can right click and say continue. I don't like doing that, so I'm going to do the single segment leader, and I can actually remember doing the what's new event for when that came out. The single segment leader, and I must admit it's probably one of my favorite features of all times, or feature adds of all times, as it's just makes ballooning so much easier without the right click or the double click. Right, so as we can see, we can highlight, and obviously we've just customized the balloon to show unique ID, but these instance properties are abundantly handy. So look into them. They also work well with iLogic, so you can add iLogic code to them to get them to populate as and when you need. Alright, so I'm going to close those, or else I'm going to get lost in all the files I'm jumping between. Don't need to save them. Alright, so next on our list we have model states. Now model states is probably one of the biggest additions to the Inventor 2022 release. And what I'm going to start with is simplification. So of course Rob mentioned simplification in his demo, and we have the ability, and I'm just going to delete this course here so that I can, well, let me go off of it. So we spoke about with BIM, of course, having levels of detail that we need to add for BIM purposes, and in this case we're going to talk about how we can use the new simplification tools. I'm just going to delete course and add it again here by saying new. And I'll just rename it slow clicking, and we'll call that course. So essentially what model states allows us to do is, it's much like levels of detail was before. It has more features within it than levels of detail before, and I guess there's some overlap between design views, between the level of detail and even positional representations, because we're actually now able within a model state to control all the things that we would have controlled in any one of those previous representations that we had. So I'm going to use this model, and now it gets me a lot, but always remember to click this little drop down here and you can find the simplification tools. So we can just define some envelopes here. Now remember, with our model state, we can do essentially whatever we want. So if you wanted to manually suppress a tool, and I'm just going to change this to cylinder, see that one there, so change my bounding box. So I'm just creating a coarse view here. Now that's a bit large for me, so I'm just going to say resize, bring it down. It looks like my center's off. It should be okay if we just move it up a bit. So going for speed, not accuracy here. But there we go, it's okay. So we can right click and say okay there. Now we have a coarse view. So model states, you know, makes it easy for you to simplify your models or keep the simplifications in varying levels. So if I just jump between fine, so that's our high-end detail, medium, which is a nice representation, nice to look at, but got none of the holes and the intricacies of the design, and of course coarse, which is simple bounding box. It makes it very easy for that Revit interoperability workflow and to save those varying levels of detail into our models. I'm just going to open up the assembly for this file. and I'm going to show you how that now links in. So just like we had link in levels of detail, we can link model states now. So they've just changed the button to now say model states. So I'm not going to link it. As you can see, it's already linked. And jumping between medium, you'll see that all the parts within this assembly are changing to the medium model state. And back to fine, which is our highest level of detail, we can see that they all jump accordingly. Now we're getting that error there because of our representations that have been lost due to the change within, the geometry that we were constraining to is now no longer there. So we'll just suppress those in this model state. I keep holding shift and right clicking, that's why I get that menu. Right click and suppress, and now we'd be fine to move between. So suppressing of constraints, suppressing of parts themselves. For example, if I wanted to suppress a whole part, I can right click and suppress it, and it'll only remain in that model state. If I go back to my master or one of my other model states, it'll revert back. So super handy function. Now model states also has an abundance of other uses, and I'm going to start with this part over here. Let me just close, sorry. I promised myself I would close parts as I went along to try not to keep a long trail of files that I'll eventually just get confused with. So there we go, they're closed now. And we're going to start looking at this little turbine impeller here, where we can then go and create model states. Now it's set up parametrically. It's not an iLogic model as such, but it's the kind of perfect candidate that we would have looked at in the past for something like an iPart. And if I just go and right click and create a new model state, within this model state, and I'm going to call this one in a second now, I'm just going to call it 18, right, for 18 blades, or 18 UL perhaps. So if I call that 18, with that active, and you can see I'm now editing this model state, I can go and change parameters. So in a model state, we can actually keep certain parameters within a build. So without even getting into iLogic, model states really makes it very easy to have a configurable model. Now you'll see that I've got a note up here in the left corner which is reflecting some of our eye properties. I can also change eye properties within my model states. So if I wanted to keep this one, we'll just make that a 1 there at the end, and we'll change this to 18 for the 18 fins. And lastly, the note that reflects 18 blades. Do I have a space there? Sorry, just hope my face is not zooming out. Seems to like certain faces in the crowd there, Rob, more than others. I'm not saying anything more than that. Right, so if we go and have a look now, we've got our master, which is on 20, and our 18 version. And that was, you can see that the eye properties are all changing as should be expected, but it was quite a pain to create a model state and then go and edit it. So we can actually edit directly in Excel. Hoping Excel's installed and working fine. Perfect. So I'll just make these a little bigger so we can see what's going on. Alright, so we have the ability to simply edit and make more fields in an Excel spreadsheet. So much like our iPart or iAssembly functionality that we had before. I can't click that. Sorry, just that control button's getting in my way. Anyway, that'll be enough of them. So I'll just use my Excel tools, so much like I did in the bill of materials earlier, to just have everything cycle up by 1 as it goes. Let's see if we can get this to work. Fantastic. We'll go with our number at the end, and we'll get those up. Right, so last one, we're going to have to do this. I know Excel's not going to work for me here, but it's been quite handy so far, so we'll just type in manually some of the blade numbers that we want. Right, so we'll go to 20 there. Now all we have to do from here is save the Excel spreadsheet and give it a close. You'll see here that it's going to update, and there we go. I've got my new fields ready to go, and if I double click them, my properties, my model, and everything reflects as would be expected. So that's great. I'm just going to give this a save, and we can then go and open up the drawing of this part, or do I not have a drawing yet? I'll just open this drawing for saving time's sake. So we can see that we can also create tables based on model states. So that's quite simple to do. We just do a general table, and it'll identify that we have a model state, or a bunch of model states rather, saved into this part that we're working on, and we can simply choose the columns or properties that we want to add. In this case, it's been done beforehand, so I'm not going to recreate the table that we have, but you can see nice and easy to just choose the columns that are relevant to our model state, or perhaps change in our model state, and yeah, create a table to reflect all the various model states within this design. So it's worth mentioning, although I don't know, I can't remember back to Cameron's talk, but it's worth mentioning that model states also interacts with Vault. There are lots of other functions within it where we can, have various items referencing the same assembly within Vault, and just, an item per model state. And there's nice controls in there too, although I'm not going to be jumping on to show you that. I will just go on to the actual assembly management. So now really just the next step up. Of course, in assemblies we can suppress parts, we can suppress sub-assemblies, components, we can have model states linked so that, when we go into a certain model state on one part, the other parts or assemblies or components then match up or line up to that. So I'm just going to go ahead. You can see that we've already got some model states in this. So we've got a 0 unit and we've got a 2 unit, so referring to our number of holes there. So we'll just go ahead and do our fancy Excel edit via spreadsheet. We'll try and make some more. I'm just going to use my keyboard commands this time rather than try to use the mouse where that pesky control window gets in my way. Right, so we'll just do that. Drag down, create some more units. Feels like I'm sitting far away from my screen, but I think it's just because I'm not used to using a laptop monitor anymore from all the days working at home. Although I will be honest, it is nice to see human beings again. I mean, other than my family. No offense, if any of them are listening. I'm going to get home to a world of hurt. Nah, I'll be okay. So anyway, it's now updated those fields, and we can see that by quickly adding in a couple of parameter changes, our property changes, or whatever it is, can give us what we would have had or had to build as an assembly field before. What I really like is the ability to just add them just like that. I felt that the assemblies and parts sort of let us down a bit before, where it would be cumbersome to add more rows to it or edit it in Inventor. We could edit it in Excel. Never really seemed quite as smooth as model states, and to be honest, the other big addition to using model states is that it's not loading all the other parts in the background. So we're not loading like with levels of detail where we would have had all the parts duplicated, essentially loaded in the background. We're now just loading the files that we need and just jumping between them with model states. So you'll find a performance bump that'll be massive on large assemblies. So the guys who are using levels of detail before to control our large data sets will now feel, moving to model states should benefit you hugely. All right, so I'm getting on in time, but I'm not going to stop, and no one's going to kick me off here. Simon, that goes out to you. So let's carry on. We're nearly there. The features are, I feel, few and far between, but I think that Autodesk has certainly gone for quantity over quality this year. So I'm going to open up our drawing automation, and where is the matching drawing for that? Sure, I think I need to get my eyes tested. Although Cameron and Rob both opted not to wear glasses, I think I should have worn glasses, and I don't normally. Right, so anyway, all right, so we're going to look at some of the little drawing automation enhancements that we have now. And if I just go and have a look at this model that we have here, it's already got some pre-set up views. Right, so we've got some views saved, and we also have added 3D annotation to it. So using our views top side, we have annotation associated to it. So what we now are able to do is to create a new drawing and choose a view. So I'm going to choose the front to start with, And you'll notice this little cog that we now have available here. So clicking that, I can choose to link to the camera view and include 3D annotations. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to place at the same time some extra views, just so they are placed, and say OK. So you'll note that because I chose that view, chose to bring in my 3D annotations, it's now annotated that view already. Going and quickly editing on my other views, I can add in the annotation for these too. So going to the top and then choosing to include my 3D annotation. Sorry, I'm not going slowly, I'm just struggling a little bit with the mouse. I think it's the tablecloth that's getting underneath it, but it's okay. And sorry, we're going to do a side, and I'm just going to go and add my annotation there. So you can see I won't worry about the isometric to save a little bit on time, but we can add or bring in our annotation from the 3D model. Now, I guess the one thing to comment on is that the placement of those annotation was done in the model and not the drawing. So you might argue that it changes up just where the effort is put in. You're still placing those dimensions at the end of the day. And the big side, or the big win here, is from an iLogic automation point of view, or where we have a model that's annotated in 3D and we can just automatically generate drawings from that one, perhaps a parametric model or iLogic driven. Now, another feature that isn't necessarily new, because we had sheet formats, but it has been enhanced, is the ability to create sheet formats. So if I right click on this view now, I can then go create sheet format and I can give it a name, and we now have the ability to fit views to a sheet. So I can go and give it whatever name I wanted, and I'm just going to call it MM2022 and tick my fit views, and we now have a sheet format there. So not too new there. What is new about the sheet formats, and I'll just close this. Remember my promise to close things as I was going. You see I already left one open in the background. Okay, we'll open up again, and we're going to try create a drawing from scratch this time. So we'll open this part here. And one of the big differences that we have here, and you'll note that I have the same view setup. So when doing this, or when using your sheet formats or your sheet setups, you need to match the views, or make sure that there is a matching view set for them. If I just go and click the drop down now and hover over drawing, you can see that I've got a drawing template saved with some sheet formats in it, or sheet setups. So if I choose one of those, let's go with this one. And I choose my model that I want to use, hit OK. It's already placed the views, and because those views had annotation in 3D annotation, it's already placed them. So a very nice tool for standardizing your drawing layouts. If you're looking for standards where we have all our views placed in certain points, or perhaps center points, it's a nice option. And you might argue that it's a little bit small, but there's no reason we can't edit the master view and just update it from there. So I suppose we'll go to 0.5 to make it a little bigger. You can simply just update the scale, and all your annotations will stay present. Okay, so that is some of the drawing automation enhancements. Now the last one that I want to discuss, and I wanted to spend more time on this, but we'll see how things are going from there, or at the back end of the show. But I'm going to open it up part, and we've got the new ability. So I've just got a simple part here to go to environments and send to Fusion. So this is a fantastic addition, because before we would have had to manually import exports. It's just nice to have a button that does it. And we get the options here to send current file. Okay, I should be signed in as my own profile. There we go, Chris England, and I can choose a folder. I'll just go with that first test there, and we'll just call it MM2022. I'm going to have lots of those set up all over. Oh, it's not my laptop. I'm okay. Although it is my Fusion account, so I guess it'll be back on my laptop when I get there. Right, so once we've loaded it or saved it to the cloud, we can then opt to open it in Fusion. Sorry, down here, open in Fusion 360. I do have Fusion open in the background, but it will open up. It's just to save the load time of the Fusion splash screen. And we'll let it import into Fusion any second now. So I nearly said it, the demo kitten, but we're fine. Right, so there we go, it's opened up into Fusion. Now, this particular part, I was going to show you some generative design or something that we could do, because you might ask yourself, well, that's great, I'm an Inventor user, why would I send it to Fusion? And a very good question, but some of the functionality that you get out of Fusion, i.e. the manufacturing extension, generative design, and some of the advanced tools within Fusion are, I suppose, far superior to anything you'll probably find on the market, never mind just within Inventor. And so there are things that we can do in Fusion that we wouldn't be able to do probably anywhere else within the Autodesk suite or any of the suites. Collections, sorry. See, I've been doing too many What's News over my many years doing this. So I'm going to go open up a part that's already set up, so we can just have a look at a little bit of a generative design setup. There we go. There it is there. I named it blue and then changed all the colors. Right, so what we have here is a generative design setup. So generative design is the process of, I suppose, using AI to iterate on a design set of functions. So it's much like an FEA simulation, but with the addition that we let the generative process take place and then offer us new potential shapes for our parts. Now, Fusion has, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, it's NetFab technology that the generative design originally comes from. And they've built that into Fusion, so we can now do that within our Fusion environment. And in fact, it's just the little drop down here, choosing generative design. And I've set up some other things. So, setting up a generative design does require a little bit of savvy and know-how, but once you get the process down, it's pretty easy. So I've just set up some obstacles, which is the void areas, i.e. my pin and my mounting area here. I've then set up some preserved geometry, which is the areas that it must keep without exception. And those are the green that you can see as sort of overlapping bodies. So I've just modeled solid bodies into it. And then lastly, I've selected my original model as my starting shape. Now, you can just use the 3D preview to generate some sort of shape. I don't know if I trust it on this. Oh, there we go. So you can see that it'll start iterating on that. We can change to our settings to high, to medium, or low. But once it sort of gets to a preview, we sort of get an idea of what it would generate, but we don't really get any outputs. We can then use the generate option, and I'm not going to generate now because it's going to take a little while. But we have the option to generate using credits, which I think Simon mentioned earlier. The pricing and the structure on that is changing. I'm not sure how. I'm a tech guy. I don't talk money or finance. But it is changing, and I'm sure Simon will be on to give a little bit more of a breakdown on that. But I'm just going to hit explore because I have done a study on this before, and we'll just see, I don't know, some of the interesting, it's not the most interesting bracket to be honest, but some of the things that generative design can sort of come out with that we probably wouldn't have conceived ourselves. So having a look there, I mean, I didn't put high stress in here, so that bracket was probably designed to handle a lot higher of a load than I put in, but you can see how it's gone and generated some interesting shapes, and that's where it's converged. If I jump backwards, we can see the different iterations that it went through to get there. Now, all of that was done automatically. If you're completely new to generative design, we can see the different stresses. So you can see I didn't load the bracket nearly enough to sort of get it to a point where it would be low on safety factors or anything like that. But just to get some interesting shapes and show it off a little bit, I thought I would add something fun to it and give you a reason for bringing things to Fusion at the end of the day. Okay, so that is What's New 2022. If you do have any questions or you would like any demonstrations in the future, please get in contact. I'm going to hand over to Simon now just to close up the day, but thank you for listening.